Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. I'm going to wait a minute or two for everybody to get in here if that's all right. And then we'll get started. Well, I guess it's one after, so we can go ahead and get started if that's all right with everybody. This is being recorded too, so we'll post it and send a link to everybody. We'll post it on our YouTube page and send a link to everybody following the webinar. And we'll also send out the slideshow as well, just so you can have it. But excited to talk to everybody today. And I appreciate everybody's time and thank you for joining. So I see a lot of familiar faces. For those of you that I know, hello, thanks for coming. For those of you that I don't know, we're the Commonwealth Group. We are consultants to mortgage lenders. Excuse me. We help with operational and compliance consulting. We help with policies and procedures and QC plans and do various audits. And we also have a fulfillment services side of the business that offers underwriting, processing, QC, condo project reviews, and Encompass admin services. So today, this is going to be kind of a QC-centric webinar where we're going to take a look at Fannie Mae's Quality Insider publication. It's a quarterly publication that they put out that details the top 10 findings that their QC department is uncovering. It's a really great publication, and it's something that we're going to encourage you to keep up with as this webinar progresses. So let me navigate here to the first slide. And I'll highlight one thing where while this is a QC webinar, it doesn't just benefit people in your QC department to keep up with these sorts of things. Our underwriting department here at the Commonwealth Group, they have a meeting on this quarterly. They like to see what Fannie Mae's looking out for, what defects they're uncovering, because that gives them a keen sense on what to look out for on their end as they're underwriting files. Because I can tell you, if Fannie's QC is finding it, you can guarantee that other investor QC groups are finding the same defects out there. So for that purpose, it's good to keep up with everything. So here is a chart of the top 10 defects. And with that, I'd like to introduce Grandi Ray, who is our resident QC expert here at the Commonwealth Group. He's actually the director of QC. So he is the go-to guy for finding any and all defects that could be found in a file. Grandi and his team do an excellent job. If there's something wrong with a file, they'll find it. But Grandi, I'm going to let you kind of go over this chart here, and I'll navigate the slideshow. Just tell me when to move on.
Absolutely. So but that chart right there, Martin showing is the top initial findings that related to eligibility finding, meaning the loan was no longer sellable. So the top one was misrepresentation of primary occupancy. And then right below that was incorrect income calculation. Then you had monthly payments not calculated correctly, income misrepresentation, insufficient assets to close, ineligible property, safety, soundness, and structural integrity, incorrect income calculation, self-employed borrower, omission of debt documentation, incorrect income calculation, and undisclosed liabilities.
Mm-hmm. So those are the top 10. We didn't want to go through all 10 with everybody here, so we were able to break it up into 4 different sections, and we'll start those now. But the 4 sections are misrep, income, liabilities, and appraisal. And you're thinking misrep. Misrep is a new top finding. This report here is dated January 2025, so it details Q4 of last year. The next one hasn't been published yet, but as you'll see, misrep is a new top defect that everybody's going to need to look out for.
Right. So as Martin was saying, misrep was the top found defect for Fannie this period. Roughly 25% of all the findings they found in the initial period were made up of misrep. So that's a large chunk of their findings. The 2 most prominent types were due to a fabricated lease agreement and misrepresentation of primary occupancy. So with the lease agreement, the borrower would go to the lender and say, okay, I'm going to retain my prior residence, but I'm going to convert it into an investment property. They would hand them the lease agreement. The terms would be due to go into effect shortly after closing or right before closing. And then what Fannie was finding on a lot of those files is that that property would actually be listed for sale on the web or would have already been sold. With misrep of primary occupancy, borrower would say, I'm looking to buy a new home, primary residence, or a refi on a primary residence. And then Fannie was finding that that property would be listed for sale shortly after the transaction closing or would be listed for rent.
Interesting. So we're going to kind of go through this. We're going to identify the defects, and then here's the next slide here. How do you find them, Grandi?
All right, so with misrep of primary occupancy, so main thing we look out for is we review the insurance coverage for the primary residence. Does that reflect that it's for primary home? If not, you need to go back to the borrower and address that issue. Also, if it's a refi transaction on primary residence, we make sure to review the bank statements, pay stubs, and the W-2s, address on those documents. Does that address align with the subject property? If not, you need to go back to the borrower and get more explanation on the discrepancy there. Excuse me.
Primary occupancy, that's interesting. It says do a quick search of the web. Grandi and I went to the Fannie Mae QC boot camp a little bit over a year ago, I'd say. And even then they were talking about it. So how do you identify primary occupancy misrep? How do you make sure that the borrower is not actually purchasing an investment property, but labeling it as the primary residence? And what the QC analysts in Fannie Mae's QC department do, they literally pull up their web browser and they search the address of the house to see if it's listed for rent. So that's not something that's easily found, obviously, before the transaction closed, but for all those QC analysts out there that are reviewing these files post-close, the internet is your friend. So take a look. Just type that subject address into your browser, and if that house is for rent, I promise you it's going to come up at the top.
Right. So then on with the misinterpretation, or excuse me, sorry, the faulty lease agreement. So that is a good bit tricky to actually catch on the pre-funding side. It's hard to call the borrower out on the lease agreement being, fake or made up. So we love to see evidence when possible that the terms of the agreement have gone into effect, which Fannie considers 2 months of rent deposits or plus this agreement deposit. Having that in the file will kind of give you more a blanket of security that that deal is actually going to go through and is not falsified.
And then I guess employment income misrep, get that verbal VOE as close to the closing date as possible to make sure the borrower does still work there. And then obviously the re-verification process. So, in post-closing QC, if you don't know, a major difference there is there's a re-verification process. So every income document that the borrower submits, every asset document, their credit report, everything is re-verified. So when we re-verify the income docs, we're reaching out to their employer to confirm, hey, this person just got a loan from our organization. Are these pay stubs that they provided, are they true and accurate? So if the employer doesn't have record of that person working there, you'll find out very quick. And that's obviously an easy way to identify it, but it's a little bit tougher on the front end prior to closing. So that is misrep for you. Let's move along to income.
All right, so this is one of the most common defects we've found. It's not just confined to this period. It's all the years I've been doing it. It's very, very common to see income mistakes on the calculation. And I'm assuming, or I can confidently say that Fannie Mae sees the same on their end. So in this report, Fannie's referencing 3 income types that were most commonly related to income mistakes. rental income, self-employment, and base. So with rental income, it could be that you just have, borrower owns 4 or 5 investment properties. It's complex. It's easy to make a mistake on that. Self-employment income is the same. The borrower may own, 2 or 3 different businesses. Also, a lot of times, we'll see lenders calculate income correctly, but then, they didn't fill out the quick and current ratio worksheets, and the business is actually insolvent. Or, maybe the business is significantly declining, more than 10%, and there's no explanation in the file or unsure if that income is likely and reasonable to continue. And then with base, that's typically a lot of times hourly workers. So what we see there is, you have a pay stub that might say, the borrower worked 40 hours for his pay period, but then when you take current year to date, it doesn't support it. So or you could have more pay stub right underneath that shows the borrower only worked 36 hours instead of a full 40 hours that week. And the lender's taking, full time 40 hours a week instead of taking the current year to date or taking the average of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, those are the most common. I remember back in my QC days a long time ago, yeah, especially with rental income and self-employment income, whenever you have to break out the worksheets and, your borrower's got multiple businesses, multiple investment properties, multiple flows of income, it's easy to fat finger numbers. It's easy to look at the wrong column on the Schedule E. So, I mean, those are the common ones. You just got to be very, very, very careful. So it's good. It's good to have the processor fill out an income worksheet. It's good to have the underwriter also fill out an income worksheet just to make sure nothing's missed. And then, in a perfect world, it's going through pre-funding QC as well. And that QC auditor is filling out an additional income worksheet. So as you know, you have to be 100% accurate. And then the base income and variable income, yeah, you got to be sure that you're looking at a salary employee. If you're giving that borrower 40 hours worth of credit per week, you've got to be sure and make sure it's not some sort of a variable income situation. But we'll kind of go into that a little bit here.
Yeah, just like Martin was saying, especially with rental income and self-employed borrowers, make sure you're filling out the utilizing income worksheet. Make sure double check the data entry. Make sure you're keeping it a button. A lot of times that can throw off qualifying income by $500 to $1,000 a month, and that could be push the loan to be outside of DTI tolerance. With base, utilize the income worksheet. Make sure it's not variable. If there's a discrepancy on the current year to date and more being full time, go back to the employer, figure out what's going on there.
Yeah, with base income, I love VOEs. I love written VOEs. I love the work number VOEs. I love it when it says 40 hours a week on there. That's really honestly the best way to be sure. Otherwise, you're going to have to get a W-2. You're going to look at consecutive pay stubs. You're going to want to make sure that the year to date is matching mostly what they made in the years past, unless they got a little pay raise or they took some time off or something like that. And then the last bullet point down there, which is a new one, obviously Fannie's coming out with their new income calculator that actually gives you rep and warrant on the income. There's a rental income section, there's self-employment income, there's obviously base. So if you fill that out, it gives you rep and warrant, but the caveat is you have to fill it out correctly. So if you make a mistake when you're filling out the new Fannie Mae income calculator and you fat finger a number and you put inaccurate data into it and it gives you rep and warrant for the file, that doesn't necessarily mean you have rep and warrant if there's a mistake in there. So it's just another abundance of caution. You have to be absolutely sure that the data that you're implementing into the calculator is accurate. So that was interesting to me. So still can make mistakes even if it says rep and warrant. Grandi, you want this one?
Up to you, Martin, however you want to go about it. So Fannie Mae also cited monthly payment, omission of debt highly. A lot of that was due to monthly payments not being calculated correctly, omission of debt, and undisclosed liabilities. So, just a reminder that student loans are back. You got to be adding in at least 1% for Fannie. And I know that trips up a lot of people sometimes because FHA only requires 0.5%. VAO has their own guidance, so it can be confusing at times.
The PITI.
I'm sorry, Martin, what did you say?
No, you keep going, Grandi. My apologies.
Oh, no, you're fine. So, and then PITI, so properties that the borrowers were retaining, they were miscalculating those monthly payments on it for those properties. So a lot of times they would just be verifying that monthly payment just via the credit report. You need to make sure full additional insurance documents, association dues, to make sure that those payments align. And then omission of debt. So, DU saying this credit line is being omitted. Fannie was not able to locate any documentation to support those omissions. And then undisclosed liabilities. This is always a big one. It's been highly ranked for them for their target reviews for 2 years straight. A lot of times, the inquiries reflected on the most recent credit report directly correlated to the undisclosed liability they found. So it really stresses the importance of making sure you're getting an explanation from the borrower on those inquiries and adding in any new liabilities that might have come from that.
Very nice. So you talked about the student loans. You got to make sure it's 1%. I thought the interesting one was the PITI or the PITIA here. If there is insurance documentation in the file, tax documentation, or mortgage statement in the file, you need to be going with that for the PITIA. Some people, I think this defect is flagged because a lot of people will just take, for example, a mortgage payment on the credit report and just put that down in the VOL, because that a lot of times that's what automatically flows through. If you're at Encompass, I know that's the case. But you really need to be checking those individual documents in the file as well, as far as insurance and taxes and mortgage statement, because those take precedent. Those override what's on the credit report. I thought that was a big one. Omission of debt here, make sure everything's documented. On this Quality Insider publication, it mentioned that these were initial documents. So, and we know it happens being around the QC department. We know that sometimes documents are left out in the package submission when you send it off to your investor or QCs. Just things happen. And, maybe some of these are attributed to that, but maybe not, so whenever you're omitting debt, make sure you've got the documents to back it up. So you've got the 12 months of bank statements, or you've got the credit supplement that says there's no more payment here, or you've got the credit supplement that says, I've got less than 10 payments left on my car note here, so we can omit it. So just there's nothing like having the docs to back it up. So whenever you have a 0 on the VOL, make sure you've got something to back it up, because that, as an auditor, that's a red flag. Whenever you see a 0, it's like, okay, well, let me go make sure there's something in here that confirms that. Grandi, you want to do undisclosed liabilities?
Yeah. So we briefly covered that. Again, it's so important to review the credit report and review the most recent inquiries listed. So make sure you're getting LOX from the borrower, explaining those, and if there's any new debts from that, add that back in. And when I'm reviewing a loan, when I see 5 or 6 other recent inquiries, it's okay. Was this borrower shopping around for additional lines of credit? it raises a flag in that sense, and it's, clarifying with that with the borrower will do great due diligence. Also, look at the transactions on the most recent bank statements in the file. Is there a recurring payment? For example, $600 to Toyota has shown up 2 months in a row, and the borrower does not have any line of credit from Toyota listed on a credit report. I'd highly recommend going back out to the borrower and getting an explanation of what that payment's from.
Yeah, that's a good point. Because a lot of when you see inquiries on the credit report, I know it's a box you have to check. Okay, we have to get a letter of explanation explaining these inquiries. And sometimes you see the borrower's initials just scrambling down the page. Yes, 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 or no, 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 no. But hey, you see a Toyota inquiry, and then you see something on the bank statement that shows some sort of down payment to Toyota or something like that. And then the inquiry letter says no new trade line opened. Something's off there. So just you use all the documents and the tools around you to make sure that there's no funny business going on, because this is, as we mentioned, a very, very prominent defect.
All right.
Appraisals?
Yep. With safety, soundness, and structure integrity. So I can't stress this enough. It's just because an appraiser goes out and marks the report as is does not mean that the report actually as is. I've looked at so many different appraisals where it's marked as is, and then I've gone through the photos and there's indication of possible mold, what stains on the wall or damage to the drywall or whatever it may be. So just because it's as is, you still need to go through and review every photo of the subject property, review the commentary, review commentary about cosmetic repairs, and ask yourself, is there something the appraiser is missing here? Do we need additional commentary? Okay, we have additional commentary. Is a inspection or additional repairs needed?
Yeah, exactly. That second bullet point I think is the most important on appraisals. Just because the appraiser checks the as is box does not mean the property truly as is. I can't tell you how many times we've seen an appraisal marked as is that should not be marked as is, whether there's holes in the wall, like Grandi said, or water damage, or something going on in the picture. So it's always, always very important to go through each picture, analyze each picture, make sure there's no safety, soundness, or security issues. Review the comments, see if anything was mentioned that might be worth investigation, because that's when you can do something about a potential problem, is before the loan closes. So don't be afraid. I know appraisers, they don't like you to go back and ask for additional clarification or additional questions, but sometimes it's necessary, because the only thing worse than an appraiser getting mad at you is a potential buyback. So I know which one I'd rather have. It's probably an appraiser being a little mad at me. So for those of our QC customers out there, I know we're pretty tough on appraisals. That's because that's where we get most of our auditor questions, or at least our underwriting department does. They get them on the collateral piece. So for that reason, we look at appraisals very seriously. So key takeaways to sum everything up. Stay up to date with this publication from Fannie Mae, the Quality Insider. It comes out every quarter. It's good to see what's going on in the industry. It's good to see what the top defects are. It's interesting to see that misrep is so high out there. I mean, we know it's always been around, but to account for 25% of the defects that Fannie Mae uncovered, it's pretty alarming. So the hair should be standing up on the back of your neck for that. And when you're talking about your own internal QC program, a lot of people, everybody's supposed to do 10% post and 10% pre, right? And that's important, obviously. But a lot of people don't go very far past that. We highly recommend looking at publications like Fannie Mae's here, looking at your trended QC data to see where the errors are coming from and combining the two. So see what the industry is experiencing, see what your shop is experiencing, if anything, currently, and make QC decisions accordingly. And when I say QC decisions, we like pre-funding QC. I said it just a minute ago. You can catch problems before the loan closes. That means you could do something about it before it's too late. Send the full file into pre-funding QC, send a component that you're not sure about into QC, send the appraisal by itself into QC, get a second pair of eyes on it. Because honestly, you can't be too careful. And the bullet point we just talked about it, we thought it was so important, we put it on here again. Just because the appraiser marks the report as is does not mean the property truly is as is. Be careful. Use the internet. Use the internet, especially if you're in post-close QC. Type the subject property address into Google. See what's going on with the property. If the borrower purchased a primary, make sure it's not listed for rent. If the borrower was saying that they're gonna rent out their old primary, make sure they didn't sell it or something like that. So we type every subject property address into the internet just to be sure. I suggest you do too. It's free. Instead of doing that Facebook stalking out there, do some Zillow and Redfin stalking on the file that you're analyzing. And the Hawaii flight, I talk about this on every QC webinar we do. There's the story of the pilot that's taken off from LA to Hawaii, and his oil pressure was low on one of his engines. And maintenance said, okay, well, yeah, we'll fix it when you get back. After you fly to Hawaii and come back to LA, that's on the maintenance report. We'll fix it. And the pilot canceled the flight. He's like, I'm not going to risk it. So I relate that to QC. If you're a little unsure about something, if your radar is flagging a little something that may be off from a misrep standpoint or off from an appraisal standpoint, like, hey, it's registering pretty high on the SSRs. I've got a couple concerns here. When in doubt, send it to QC. Send it to pre-funding QC. Don't close the loan or so to speak, take off in the airplane to Hawaii, because after that, when you're in the middle of the ocean or after the loan's closed, there's no turning back. So, did I leave anything out, Grandi?
To get it on the head.
Cool.
I did see a question come in from Debbie.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure if that was relating to misrep. She was asking if we were able to find such a thing on our loan. Are we able to call the note due? How do we take care of this issue, or what would Fannie Mae do?
It's a good question. Let me find an answer for you, and I'll email you back individually if that's okay. Were there any other questions, Grandi?
That is the only one I'm seeing.
Well, great. Like I said, we'll send the slideshow out to everybody. We'll record the webinar is already recorded. We'll upload it to our YouTube channel. I'll send the link to Fannie's Quality Insider publication too. I think there's a way to set up alerts as well, email alerts when they come out with these new publications. The QC one should be coming out soon, covering Q1. I know things in the government move extremely fast, but hopefully that's out here pretty soon. But the most recent publication they had was on that income calculator, the new Fannie Mae rep and warrant income calculator. Take a look at that. And if you do choose to use it, make sure those numbers are accurate, because just because you get the rep and warrant check mark, if something's wrong on the calculator, you may not actually have rep and warrant. So, well, with that, we appreciate everybody's time. We always like to try to keep these on the shorter end rather than the longer end, because I know everybody's very busy right now and probably trying to head out for a long 3-day weekend. But once again, thank you for coming to sit with us for a little bit. We appreciate it very much. And I hope you have a great rest of your week and a nice long weekend.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.